Ever get that feeling like you want to like really wrap your head around a big idea, you know? Like get right to the juicy center of it, but without it feeling like homework.
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's exactly what we're up to today, right?
Totally, yeah.
Diving deep into this super fascinating concept from these philosophers, Deleuze and Guattari, their idea of the nomad.
Right.
Mostly from their book, 1,000 Plateaus.
Yeah.
So
it's really cool stuff.
yeah, so we're not just going to like throw around fancy philosophy words.
No, not at all.
What we want to do is really like break down what this nomad idea even means and why it still matters today.
Right.
Yeah, like how it gives us this way to look at how people push back against all these like rigid systems in life.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So like, okay,
Yeah.
the big idea of the nomad, right?
Yeah.
It's not just some wanderer like just walking around with no purpose. It's like a big metaphor, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
For anything that doesn't want to be put in a box.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Like for identities that are always changing.
Totally.
And for like challenging those power structures, those top-down ones that just feel stuck.
Absolutely. And it's all tied up with some of their other big ideas.
Yeah.
Like nomadology.
Oh, yeah.
Which isn't just studying nomads, you know?
Yeah.
The people, it's like the whole philosophy behind it.
Right.
This idea of movement
Uh-huh.
and deterritorialization,
Right.
which is like a really powerful force.
Yeah.
Then there's rhizomatic thinking, which we'll get into.
Okay.
And the whole war machine concept.
Oh, right. The war machine.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of intense.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But it's not just about fighting,
Yeah.
you know?
Okay.
At least not in how they first talk about it.
Right.
It's more about anything that's like outside
Uh-huh.
and against the fixed way the state works.
Oh, okay. So that takes us to that contrast they make between the nomad and the
state.
Right.
Right.
Like when they say the state, yeah, they're talking about those systems that are like all about hierarchy.
Yes.
And control.
Yeah, all those authorities that want to like organize and be in charge.
Right.
Yeah.
Put everything in its place.
Exactly.
Okay.
So in their way of thinking, the state is all about what they call striated space.
Okay. Striated space.
Imagine like a space that's been all marked up and divided and controlled.
Okay.
So like nation states with their borders.
Yeah.
Legal systems that say what you can and can't do in certain places. Even like city planning.
Right.
Like where you can walk and what a building can be used for.
Right.
That's all striated space.
Okay, so it's like everything has its assigned spot.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's category.
Yeah, and then you've got the nomad
right.
hanging out in smooth space.
Yeah, so what's that all about?
Smooth space is like the total opposite of striated space.
Okay.
It's a place with no limits,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
open, always changing,
Mm-hmm.
and totally free from those rigid structures.
Okay, but it's not just about like physically moving around.
Exactly. It's not just about that.
Okay.
You could be sitting still and still be a nomad in your thinking.
Right.
It's really about how you see the world
Yeah.
and how you interact with it.
Mm-hmm.
A mindset that's not about being confined or labeled.
Right.
Not at all.
Okay, so we got these two opposite ideas.
Yeah.
Let's dig into what makes a nomad a nomad.
Okay, yeah.
Like in this philosophy way, right?
Mm-hmm.
The text mentions this word deterritorialization,
Right.
which sounds super academic.
Yeah, it does.
What does it actually mean here?
So what's really interesting here is this idea that nomads aren't tied down
Okay.
to one specific territory.
Yeah.
And that doesn't just mean land.
Right.
It can also mean like a fixed identity or a set of beliefs.
Okay. So they're not rooted in just one place or one way of thinking?
Exactly.
Okay.
They're constantly moving and changing,
Yeah.
crossing through different spaces, taking
Yeah.
on different perspectives. And they're really challenging those boundaries that the state tries to put up with its striated space.
Right. So it's like they're actively resisting being pinned down.
Totally.
Defined.
Yeah.
Categorized.
All about that.
Okay, so it's about not belonging to just one place.
Yeah.
Or one idea.
Right.
It's always adapting and shifting perspectives.
Exactly.
And that ties right back into that smooth space idea, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Right.
Yeah, smooth space is what makes deterritorialization possible.
Good.
Because there are no hard lines or categories to hold the nomad back.
It's like a realm of pure possibility.
Yeah.
It is always changing.
Totally.
Unpredictable.
Yeah, completely different from the controlled, predictable nature of striated space.
Right. Okay, so we talked about the war machine earlier.
Yeah.
And you said it's not just about like actual war.
Right.
So if it's not about armies and battles,
Yeah.
then what is it?
Well, this is really key to understanding their idea,
Okay.
the war machine here. It represents all those forces, those ways of thinking and organizing
Yeah.
that work outside and against the central power of the state
Okay.
and any other rigid institution.
So it's like anything that disrupts the status quo.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be violent in the traditional way,
Right.
but it's disruptive by its very nature.
Okay.
It's fluid adaptable,
Yeah.
not hierarchical.
So it's more about staying flexible
Yeah,
and creative
totally.
to stay out of the control of those dominant structures.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like this constant undercurrent of resistance.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Not always this head-on fight.
Right, exactly.
And that fluidity,
Yeah.
it seems connected to this idea of non-hierarchical thought
It is.
or rhizomatic thinking.
Mhm.
Can you explain that a bit more?
Sure. So if we think of the state as this top-down pyramid
Okay.
where knowledge and power flow from the top down,
Yeah.
rhizomatic thinking is totally different.
Okay.
Think of a rhizome, like the roots of grass or ginger.
Okay.
It spreads out sideways.
Mhm.
It creates a network with tons of entry and exit points.
Yeah.
There's no central command.
Okay.
And that's how the nomad sees the world,
Right.
connecting ideas in this decentralized way. Resisting those straight lines, those hierarchical structures of knowledge that the state usually pushes.
So it's like a way more interconnected and less controlled way of seeing and understanding things.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that leads to the last key characteristic.
Okay. Multiplicity.
Right. Multiplicity.
Yeah.
What does that mean for the nomad?
So multiplicity means the nomad isn't just one fixed thing with one clear identity.
Right.
It's about having multiple adaptable identities.
Yo.
They can change shapes,
Yeah.
take on different perspectives,
Uh-huh.
be different things as they move through these smooth spaces.
So there's no one unchanging core.
Nope.
It's about always becoming,
Yeah.
having tons of potential.
Okay, so we're building this image of the nomad as fluid,
Yes.
deterritorialized,
Right.
hanging out in smooth spaces,
Right.
using a war machine of like decentralized resistance,
Effect.
thinking rhizomatically and embodying all these multiple identities.
Yeah.
It's a lot to take in,
It is.
but it's starting to make sense.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the text gives us some really interesting examples
It does.
of how this nomad idea shows up in different areas of life.
Yeah, totally.
Let's start with philosophy.
Okay.
How can a philosopher be a nomad in this way?
Well, what's really cool is this idea of thinkers who don't stay stuck in one academic box.
Right.
Deleuze himself is a great example.
Okay.
He pulled ideas from philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
literature,
Yeah.
art, film,
Right.
always crossing those lines between different intellectual areas.
Right. So he wasn't afraid to blend different fields of knowledge.
Not at all.
Yeah.
He didn't want to be categorized.
Right.
And that's the nomadic spirit in action.
Right. It's about challenging those old categories of thought.
Exactly.
Okay, what about in art and literature?
Yeah.
Where do we see this nomadic spirit there?
Well, think about those experimental artists and writers
Uh-huh.
who mess with traditional genres and forms.
Okay.
They might mix different mediums,
Yeah.
break up traditional stories,
Uh-huh.
explore themes that are hard to put in a box.
Right.
They're basically moving through the smooth space of artistic expression,
Okay.
pushing against the striated space of rules and expectations.
So it's about stretching the boundaries of what art and literature can even be.
That's it.
Okay. And what
Yeah.
about in politics?
Oh, yeah.
How does the nomad show up there?
So think about revolutionary movements
Yeah.
and the activists who resist the state's power.
Uh-huh.
They often create decentralized networks.
Uh-huh.
They work outside the normal political systems,
Right.
and they challenge the established order in ways that are, like, unexpected.
Right.
Their power comes from their ability to adapt, to be
Yeah.
to deterritorialize from the norms and expectations of the state.
That definitely sounds familiar with a lot of movements happening today.
It does.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay, this next one is super relevant for our listeners today.
I think so.
Technology,
Yeah.
specifically the internet.
Uh-huh.
How does the internet fit into this idea of a nomadic space?
Well, first, the internet was seen as this huge open space
Yeah.
where ideas could flow freely,
Right.
unrestricted by geography
Right.
or control.
Right.
It was like the ultimate smooth space for information and communication.
Definitely.
But as the text says,
Yeah.
we've seen states and corporations trying to take control,
Yeah.
adding more striated elements to the digital world.
Right.
But the potential for decentralized interaction
Mm.
and the fast spread of information
Yeah.
still has that nomadic feel to it.
Okay, so it started as this like limitless, smooth space,
It did.
but then this tension with control started to come in.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like this ongoing question.
Yeah, it is.
Can truly nomadic thought actually survive in these increasingly regulated digital spaces?
That's the question.
It's a constant back and forth, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, between that initial promise of freedom and the attempts to control it.
Totally.
Okay, so let's bring this into the real world today.
Okay.
And look at some examples of nomadic thought that might resonate with you, the listener.
Yeah.
The text talks about digital nomads.
Uh-huh.
That's pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty direct connection.
Right.
Yeah.
Like they're literally living that nomadic life.
They are.
Yeah.
Digital nomads are rejecting the old ways of working,
Right.
the idea of being tied to one office.
Yeah.
They're embracing that fluidity,
Oh.
working remotely,
Yeah.
crossing borders easily.
Right.
They're living a nomadic existence in the modern world,
They are.
deterritorializing from the traditional office and the whole idea of a fixed workplace.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're also seeing this with the rise of decentralized networks, like cryptocurrencies and open source projects.
Yeah.
How do those connect to the nomad idea?
What's interesting here is their built-in resistance to central authority.
Okay.
Cryptocurrencies want to bypass those old financial institutions,
Yeah.
and open source projects rely on collaboration from everywhere,
Uh-huh.
not just from the top down.
Right.
These are ways of creating smooth spaces
Mm-hmm.
within systems that used to be super striated
Yeah.
and controlled.
Okay.
They embody that war machine aspect,
Yeah.
the decentralized challenge to establish power.
Right.
Like if you look at cryptocurrencies,
Yeah.
they're trying to make a financial system that's not controlled by central banks or governments,
Right.
a totally deterritorialized form of exchange.
Yeah. Okay. And finally, the text mentions postmodern identity.
Yes.
Things like gender fluidity,
Yeah.
cultural hybridity,
Yeah.
and non-traditional lifestyles.
Yeah.
How do those relate to the nomad?
Well, these are all about moving away from rigid categories,
Okay.
those binary either ways of thinking.
Yeah. And moving toward a more fluid and multifaceted understanding of identity.
Okay.
Gender fluidity challenges those fixed gender norms.
Right.
Cultural hybridity embraces the mixing of different cultural influences.
Uh-huh.
And non-traditional lifestyles reject those conventional ways of living. In
Yeah.
all these cases,
Yeah.
people are embodying that nomadic idea
Okay.
of multiplicity
Yeah.
and deterritorialization.
Right. So they're breaking free from those fixed identities and societal structures.
Exactly.
Okay. So to sum it all up,
Yeah.
this nomad concept isn't just some abstract philosophy thing.
No, it's not.
It's a framework for understanding how we resist being put in a box,
Yeah.
how we embrace change,
Right.
how we challenge those rigid systems in all parts of our lives,
Yeah.
from how we think and create
Mhm.
to how we work and define ourselves.
Exactly.
It's really about seeing the power of movement, both physically and in our minds,
It is.
and the strength that comes from not letting those dominant systems define us. Absolutely, this concept from Deleuze and Guattari,
Yeah.
it really encourages us to think outside those fixed categories
Uh-huh.
and see the potential in those smooth spaces where anything is possible.
Yeah. So as you're listening,
Yeah.
think about the structures in your own life,
Mm-hmm.
your work, your beliefs, your daily routines.
Yeah.
Where do you see that structured, striated space?
Right.
And where are there chances for a more nomadic way of thinking or being?
Yeah. What could you do differently?
Right. What new possibilities open up if you challenge some of those rigid boundaries?
It's worth thinking about.
It really is definitely something to ponder.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that's it for our deep dive today.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Really fascinating.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Until next time.
See you later.